Hi everyone! I thought it is time to make another realism video, and therefore I wanted to use this drawing, which I actually did last summer, about 8 months ago, and I had a couple of requests lately on how I structure or organize my drawings and paintings before I even start. And therefore I just want to use this footage, as this is a good example of how I normally try to work, tend to work, and how I try to organize myself before I really start grabbing the first pencil. The project here is basically done in pastels, showing Jason and Lukas, which are two Instagrammers and YouTubers from the Netherlands, and I really liked that photo and the emotion that it transmitted. And this was also the reason why I contacted them in the very first place, asking if I can make a drawing of them. They luckily agreed, and the first step was done. So once I had my okay, I could start planning out how I want this drawing to look in the end, and of course which materials I want to use. There are so many possibilities in arts as usual. You can decide whether you do it in charcoal, in graphite, in pastels, in colored pencil, in acrylics, in oils, or whatever medium you are into. Not to forget watercolors, but I'm really bad at those. I normally decide about the medium that I'm going to use when I see the photo. I don't really have a guideline for myself knowing which medium to use. I do have some kind of feeling which medium I would like to use for this, or in what medium I might succeed the best. So there are photos where I immediately think you should use oil colors for this, because this is the medium you should go for. There are photos which tell me to use pastels or just charcoal. I can't really say what causes this feeling, but it is like it is. So and for this one I decided to start with pastels. As I did not really do so many works in pastels at that point, I was not sure if I can succeed in it anyways. But on the good side of it, if you decide to use pastels, you can always reconsider using colored pencil as well, which was my backup plan for this part here. But let's start with the beginning. Once I decided which medium to use, I also decide which size I want to have it. And bottom line, the larger you do something, the easier it's going to get. Because you just have more room and more space for a certain color or color transition or shading. The smaller your artwork is going to be, the more difficult it's going to get to shade in the colors and make transitions or add details and all this stuff. So for myself, the larger a project is, the easier it's going to get, and therefore I decided to use my Canson Mi-Teintes pastel paper, which has a fairly rough texture, but it can grab the pastel pigments quite well. And I had a couple of sheets of this paper here in the size of 55 by 60 centimeters, which was a perfect match for this project. Or you can cut the paper if you have a larger size, which does not perfectly fit to the paper, of course. So in this case here it matched quite well. After I made my outlines with just a regular pencil, and for making those outlines you can use whatever method you actually like to. I do have a video on my channel about tracing, and this is something I would recommend you watching if you're new to the entire realism painting and drawing. So there I show all my methods that I occasionally use to trace something onto a larger sheet of paper. In this case I printed it on clear film and used an overhead projector to project it large size. If you have a beamer or an LCD projector, if it's called in English I think, you can use this method as well. You can also trace it with a tracing paper or whatever method you like, even if you freehand it, which might be the most artistic way to do it, but it's also the most time consuming. And to be honest, who of us really has time? I would rather trace, saving me 2 hours of work and having perfect shaped outlines by tracing instead of freehanding everything and correcting. And freehanding on this kind of paper even adds a bit more pressure to you because you cannot really erase so good. Because the pencil grabs really well to this paper as this is so rough, and if you want to erase it, you just destroy the paper over time. So this was another factor for me to just trace it, which I actually normally do, and I don't really consider it like cheating. So this is kind of controversy over the entire art scene. Some consider it cheating, some don't. I myself belong to the faction that is not considering it cheating, because even if you have traced it and you have no idea how to shade, how to color, which colors to use, the perfect outlines is not really so good for you anyways, because the really important and hard work comes after the outlines are done, which is the shading. But let's get back to the artwork in general. I started with the background, because it's always a good idea to start from the background and work forward to the foreground. If you start with the foreground, it is way harder to shade in the background in the end, as you have to avoid crossing your lines over the foreground painting, or drawing in this case. So I usually start with the background. And I normally go with the very darkest colors first, because this is going to help you very much in the end deciding how light and how dark you should go with the rest of the painting. The values, so the lights and the darks, is the most important part in any painting or drawing. Even if your colors are a bit off, which is not really so much a deal in the very end, if your lights are not light enough and your darks are not dark enough, this is way more prominent to the viewer than whatever off color you might have used for the skin tones or so. For the most part of this drawing you can see the reference photo just laying onto it, so you can see what I am doing and checking against the reference photo. You might probably see that not all the colors are perfectly matching the colors on the reference photo, which is again not my goal here. I wanted to catch the impression, the fun, the joy that they both had sitting in this field. When I started painting and drawing, it really hit me not having the perfect shades. So if I had a color that was not exactly the same from the reference photo, it drove me mad, it drove me crazy, and I really wanted to have everything completely 100% matching, which is so stressful. So it really took a while to get myself over it and just go for it. So if the shade is not perfectly matching, just go for it. In the end, everything has to fit together on the piece that you are working from, no matter if it's perfectly the colors of the reference photo. As long as your drawing or painting looks logical, genuine, fitting together, you're on the good side. So everything is good. So when the background was done, and this is a blurry one here, which I just used some greens and blacks and dark greens, adding some yellow, white, light greenish colors, round circles over it, which will create the out of focus blurry background. This just does the job. It is really simply done. You can even overdo it with adding more of those circles, adding more shapes and colors. But the more you, in a way, highlight the background, the more disturbing it is going to look in regards of the foreground of the painting. Because you do not want to have the background stand in focus, because it's actually out of focus. You want the people to be the main focus, and so nothing in the background should distract from that. So also the field, although it is nearer to the camera, is still blurry. Just to have it blocked in and see the shade of it, it does not really have so much detail yet. This will come later. If I decide to everything looks great in the very end as it is, with no detail in the field, okay, why not? Just leave it as it is. It is all up to you. Just in case you wonder, for the most parts of this, I used my pastel pencils, which is the Faber-Castell pit pencils, which I like the very most. And I also used some pit pastels and a sponge, as you can cover quite large areas with those very easily, and it works a bit quicker than using a pencil. So I really like the pit pastels for large areas as well. When it comes to the faces, of course, I stick to the pencils again, because you have way more control over those than you will have with the pit pencil and the sponge. Of course, you can use the sponge to blend colors as well, but the thing with these pastels is, as you are working in layers, and if you use the sponge, you in a way lift up some pigments that you did not really want to lift up in the very end. So most of the time I just used my fingers to blend the colors, which also presses the pigments more into the paper itself, which makes it easier than having any tool that you like to use. Using a brush also works for the first layers to blend, but again, if you have a couple of layers of pigments already on your paper, using a brush also removes the pigments, which looks in a way a bit odd in the very end. Basically, it is all about layering. So if you have your base layer of your skin tone, you add more and more tones and shapes to, so in a way, carve the facial structures. Add darker tones where it's going into the shadow, add lighter tones where it's going towards the light, and have a close look to a reference photo, as this is really important to figure out if you're on the right track. So never really fall into the habit to draw or paint what you would think it looks like. Just stick to the reference photo and paint or draw how it looks like there. Even if it looks a bit odd and not what you think it should look like, just draw it or paint it the way it is on the reference photo, as in the very end everything will make sense together. And for this drawing here, I came to a point where I realized that I cannot really add more details or highlights or shadows with the pastels because I'm just not trained to use them, and so I just do not have the hang for it yet. I was pretty proud with the result that I received so far, but then I decided to transition over to my colored pencil, as I have the most control over them when it comes to details and shading. For those, I have quite a variety of pencils available. I do have the Prismacolors, I do have the polychromo pencils, I have a couple of luminance as well, and some from Faber-Castell Drawing. And I just continue the same what I did with the pastels, layering up, increasing values, so darken the blue for the t-shirt for example, or making some highlights with a pure white, just to make some of those details stand out more than I was able to do with the pastels alone. This again took quite a while, of course, and every now and then you should step back from your drawing just to see if everything looks great together. If you're very close to a quite large project, you in a way lose your feeling for the entire piece. So if you step back for a meter or two and have a look at it, or even stop for 15 minutes, do something completely else and step back, you will see mistakes or errors that you did on the go which you didn't realize in the very beginning or while you were working on it. I do this quite often times, and a couple of times I also use my telephone and just make a photo of it, because when you see the photo taken with your phone and not looking at the original piece all the time, you can see those areas where you still have to improve on. Because cameras do not really catch all the shades then in real life, and they in a way over-exaggerate a bit. So this will show you areas where you probably gone too dark or too light, or where some shapes are still a bit off. So this is something I often do in between just to see if I'm on the right track myself. And in the very end, I just added the corn or the grass, which was in the very foreground, covering parts of their faces, as you can see here. One important thing to note here, if you work in colored pencil in between and you want to make the very foreground, so these corn leaves, whatever you call them, make sure to leave them blank, because if you used colored pencil, you will not be able to go over it with the pastels. It just will not stick anymore. And this was actually what I did for this piece here. Oftentimes I do these, let's call mixed media pieces. I already had a couple of drawings where I started with pastels and I was confident, and on the go realized that this is not going to work the way I wanted it to look like. So I decided to use colored pencil on the go and just switched over way earlier than I did on this project. But then there also come the times where I realize that colored pencil is so time consuming and it takes ages. And if it is a large project and you use colored pencil alone, it takes forever. And I am impatient. And so I decided on the go to use oil colors instead. Because oil colors work quite quickly, and I do have some training on them, and I can control the colors and shadings and all the stuff that you need to know to work in oils. And I also do have some oil color tutorials here on my channel in case you're interested about color mixing, shading, skin tones, all stuff is here available. Yeah, I can show you a video here as well, just a reference link, what I meant. And this was one of those where I started in pastels, switched over to colored pencil, and in the end ended up using oils because I felt this is the only way I can finish it. And you do not really have to be afraid to switch in between mediums. In my very first times when I started with the arts in general, I just wanted to stick to one medium. It was my holy grail to finish something in just one medium, and it felt like doing something wrong when I switched mediums in between, which is just not true. You just have to use what you have to use to bring the result to an end as pretty as you can. And it took me a while, of course, and I had to go over myself just to use different mediums to finish a project, and even probably redeciding on the go to another medium. The thing that matters is the end result. It is not so much the way that you need to go to achieve this. The viewer in general does not really care how you achieved this goal, how you achieved the look that you have achieved. Of course, here, thanks to YouTube, everything became a bit more transparent, and more artists show their working process and their failures and successes. Many or most of them only show their successes, and this is the reason why I also want to show some failures and corrections that I did on the go. And I want to try to help out as many as you as possible and to encourage you to not stop drawing or painting, even if you face issues. There is always a way around it, and although it might be hard in the very beginning when you start out, the more experience you get, the easier it's going to get for you as well, because you learn more and more steps and workarounds how you can correct things which you were not able to correct in the beginning. So like with everything in life, the more you practice, everything is going to get easier in the very end. So this video turned out to be quite long. If you have any questions for this project in particular or in whatsoever medium, just let me know in the comments below. I'm always happy to help you. I hope you liked this video. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, if you liked the drawing. If you found it interesting, please subscribe to my channel. It really means a lot to me. And please also click the bell icon to get notified when new videos are coming up. All the materials that I've used are listed below in the description box as usual. And other than that, I thank you for watching and I wish you a great day. Bye bye.